Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make gingerbread biscotti, and this is what they look like. This biscotti is so flavorful. For the gingerbread flavor, we have molasses along with ground cinnamon, ginger, and cloves, but we also have hazelnuts, raisins, chocolate chips, and some rolled oats. So, really good, and you'll want to make these all year round. So the first thing you will need to do is preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. And then you will need a baking sheet and line that with parchment paper, or you could just lightly butter it or spray it with one of those nonstick sprays. Now, the first thing we're going to do is you will need 3/4 of a cup, which is 100 grams of hazelnuts. Now, typically at least when I buy my hazelnuts, they always have the skin still on them, so we have to remove that. So you want to put them on a baking sheet, put them in the oven probably 13-15 minutes until you really start to smell them, and the skin will start to like blister and start to come away from the nut. And then what you do is you take them out and then put a clean dish cloth over the top and let them like steam for about 5-10 minutes. And then what you do is, this is what they look like after being baked, is I just take them between the palms of my hands and rub them, and as you can see, the skin comes right off. And then just let them cool a little more, and then what you're going to do is coarsely chop them. These ones are not very big, so I just cut them in half. So that's what you do. Now, for this batter, if you have an electric stand mixer like I have here, use your paddle attachment, or you can use a hand mixer, or really, this is a very easy batter to make. You could just mix it by hand. But what we're going to do is we're just going to dump all of our dry ingredients into our mixer. So you will need 1 3/4 cups, which is 225 grams of all-purpose flour. You may know that as plain flour. And then I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup, which is 160 grams of light brown sugar, although you could use dark brown sugar here as well. And firmly, if you're measuring by cups, make sure you really kind of tamp that down into your measuring cup. And then for our spices and our leavening, you will need 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of salt. And then for our flavoring, I'm adding 3/4 of a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of ground ginger, and just 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground cloves. Of course, you can vary your spices to your taste. And then rolled oats. I mean, they kind of add nice texture and flavor, and they look kind of cool in the biscotti. So you will need to start with 1 cup, which is 90 grams. I'm using old-fashioned rolled oats. Although, for this recipe, you could probably use the instant ones. Really, the difference between the two is only in the thickness of the oats. So for this recipe, either one. But what you want to do is take 1/2 cup, 45 grams, and put it in your food processor, and then just process it until it's finely ground. It almost looks like flour. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to put that in there, and then I'm going to put my 1/2 cup, just regular ones. And that's it for now, for our dry. So all I'm going to do is mix that together. Simple enough. So you really could do that by hand. I'm being a little lazy, but. So now for our wet ingredients, I have 2 large eggs here, and you want them at room temperature. And I'm just going to break them up. And then to that, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons, about 25 grams. I'm using like a flavorless oil. So that could mean vegetable, corn, canola, safflower. You could even use a light olive oil. And yes, if you prefer, you could use 2 tablespoons, 25 grams of melted butter. Just a little bit of fat. And for flavoring, I'm adding 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of pure vanilla extract. So if you want to leave the vanilla out, you can. And then, of course, gingerbread needs molasses. So you will need just 1/4 of a cup which is about 95 grams of, I'm using unsulted molasses, and that's a pretty mild flavor molasses. Now, when you measure it out, what I do is I first spray the inside of my measuring cup, or you could lightly oil it with like nonstick spray, and then put it in, because any ingredient like molasses or honey or corn syrup, something like that, that's really sticky, if you kind of lightly oil your measuring cup, as you can see, it comes out a lot easier than if you don't. Okay, and whisk that in. As you can see, you could do this by hand. It's not a lot of mixing. Okay, and just going to put this in with our dry ingredients, and we're going to mix it all together. Okay, so I haven't quite mixed everything together, but now I'm just going to scrape here, and I'm going to add all my yummy ingredients. So I'm going to add all those hazelnuts. I'm also going to add a half a cup, 60 grams. I'm using golden raisins. You could also use the dark raisins. And then I'm adding a third of a cup, 60 grams. I'm using semi-sweet chocolate chips. You could use dark, you could use white. And actually, even for the raisins, you could use other dried fruits like dried cherries, dried cranberries, or you could, use some figs cut up or dates. Really, the chocolate chips and the raisins, you could really, have fun with that and just change up as what you like. So what I'm going to do is just mix all this in. Okay, and that's it. So as I said, you could do this by hand. So now we're going to divide the batter because we're making 2 logs. As you, I don't know whether you know, biscotti means twice baked. The first bake is normally we form it into a log, bake it off until it's firm, and then we cut it into our slices and bake it again. And the second baking is what dries it out to give it that really nice crisp and crunchy texture that we know and love with biscotti. So this is a sticky dough. So I'm going to use my scale. You could put it into a ball and divide it in half and eyeball it, but I'm going to just measure it out. So on your scale, about 450 grams per log. I'm going to get my fingers in there. It'd be a lot easier, although make my fingers really sticky, but okay. And then I'm going to take some flour here on my surface and on my hands. And then I'm going to form it into a log about 9 inches long, which is 23 centimeters. Roughly about that. Is that 9? Yeah, it's about 9. 9 to 10, So 23 to 25. And then just flatten it out, like so. Square up your ends. So I'll just do the other one, same way. Okay, so they're about 9 inches, like I said, 23 centimeters by about 3 inches, 7.5 centimeters. If you have one of these scrapers, it's good to and of course you can clean up your counter with this as well. So now, our first baking. Everyone's oven is a little different. I find about 30 minutes. So what we're looking for, they will spread a little, so that's why you want to leave a little distance between the two logs. They will spread, but when you touch them, it'll be pretty firm to the touch. So about 30 minutes. And I like to rotate my baking sheet front to back about halfway through baking. Okay, so we have finished with our first bake. As you can see, they have spread quite a bit. And when I touch, it's firm, but there's a little give to it. So we have like essentially set the structure and mainly baked it. So what I've done is put your baking sheet on a wire rack. We're going to let that cool for 10 minutes, and then after that we're going to slice them into our individual cookies. And also, reduce your oven temperature to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 150 degrees Celsius. So our logs have cooled down. It's been about 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do is just transfer to a cutting board. And then what we're going to do is slice them. I like them about 3/4 of an inch thick, which is about 2 centimeters. I mean, you could do them thinner, but this is about the thickness I like. And what I do is I just kind of slice off the ends because not quite even. And I put that aside. Cook's treat. I can eat that while they're baking. And then I like to use a ruler and get about 3/4 of an inch. And then I'm slicing on a slight diagonal, not like straight down. And another piece for me on the end. So like I said, the first baking kind of cooks them, sets the structure, and now this second baking, we're going to draw out the moisture, and that's why they're going to be nice and crisp and crunchy. Now you can vary how much you want to dry these out. I actually like them quite crisp and crunchy because I like to dip them in my coffee. And also keep in mind that when they first, after you finish this final baking, they will be really crisp. But once you store them, you can store these, for quite a few weeks. I do find they soften just by storing them for a few days. So just keep that in mind. So what I like to do is about 6 to 8 minutes per side. Until like when I touch them, they're a little firm. And then, so 6 minutes, and then we're going to bring them out, flip them over, and then another 6 minutes to 8 minutes on the second side. Oh, need my oven mitts here. Okay, so our gingerbread biscotti are done. So put your baking sheet on a wire rack. Don't they look gorgeous? If I touch them, there's a little give, but they're pretty firm. So you want to let them cool completely, and when that happens, they're going to become like quite hard and quite crunchy. So on the first day, if you want to eat them, you really want like to dip them in coffee or hot chocolate or even a glass of milk. But what I find is when you cover and store them for a few days, they will start to soften. So I'm going to try one that I made a couple days ago because they have softened a little. So now they become like a hard and crunchy cookie, really flavorful. You have that gingerbread flavor, and then you have, the hazelnuts, which I love. And I meant to say, if you don't want to use hazelnuts, you could use walnuts or pecans or even almonds. That's other choices. And then, of course, chocolate chips. Hazelnuts and chocolate chips, and even with the gingerbread flavor, they really go well together, as well as the raisins. So, a really flavorful cookie. People love getting biscotti for gifts, but save a few for yourself. So make these. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyabaking.com.